Abdul, welcome to season 2 premiere, and thank you for coming to the debrief show this fine evening. Why don't you open the whole conversation first by who you are, what you do, what's the field of experience and expertise do you bring into this topic?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. A little bit scared, but good to be here. Good to be with young people talking about things that actually matter to us. My name is Abdul, originally from Ba, currently based in Ba. I work in the development space, mostly on gender, human rights, climate change, and a few other fields. And let's talk about what is going on in Fiji today.
Man. I mean, Fiji has come out of 18 years of ruling of one government, and now we have a coalition government. And the atmosphere has changed. What was promised from the beginning, and as 2026 we're in election year, the crisis facing the country is very different perspective of what we wanted to see. With so many issues happening in the country, what's your personal thought on some of the things that really needs attention given election could be less than a year away?
And we go right off the bat into something that is so difficult to summarize. Like, this government has come off the back of a 16-year government that was partly made out of military government after a military coup, and then that through elections in a constitutional democratic way, but had elements of the military within the Fiji's governance structure. So they did inherit some baggage with what governance and democracy should not have looked like. But apart from that, there have been some teething issues that have continued well into the term for this government. We are in the final year, and there has been a lot of mixed sort of emotions or reviews on the performance of the government, and the fact that there have been some pretty wild things that have happened in the past 3 years going into the 4th year that makes it difficult to give the past new government or a change directly it is good or bad. There has been some things that have that people have welcomed. For example, the first thing the government did in terms of legislature was the repealing of MIDA, which was something that was welcomed. I personally like the idea that the government was moving towards positive legislating, where we were trying to repeal or talking about repealing acts or laws that were contrary to what human rights values are. But at the same time, we fell a bit short. For example, we never went further and maybe repealed or amended the Public Safety Order Act, which in my opinion was something that was used as a tool to maybe persecute or keep people in check in curbing their freedom of rights, speech, association, etc. I think it's come up recently with one of the utilities sector, where unionization of workers has come under scrutiny. I think the previous government removed the unionizing of a lot of sectors by saying these are essential services, effectively taking away people's or workers' right to strike. And that has remained in place. So I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of change was promised. Some of it has happened. A lot has been left to be desired in terms of we wanted to see more. A lot of people who are in government now were in the opposition, who stood up and talked about things that were not going right. And then when they came into power, I think a lot of people expected that if you were talking about what is the right thing to do on the opposite side of parliament, now in power, you'd probably implement that. I think salary has become a sore issue. There have been several things over the period of the past 3 years that has happened that has been contrary to what individuals or political views were in the last 8 years of parliamentary democracy, I would say in quotes, or the military regime time. So it's a very difficult question to answer, and as I'm thinking about this, so many things to talk about, and we probably don't have the time, but maybe we can unpack that further a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like an open general question, but like for the people, just to do a recap, because one of the things we have wrong with Fiji is that once the event has passed, we forget about it. coup has happened back in 2000, 99, 98, 1997. Still at the back of our head, but we forgot the acts and the people who committed those coups and what kind of prosecution where they went through. If you have to characterize state of the current economy right now and the democracy in our field to the previous government who ruled for 18 years with an iron fist, I guess. And I like what you said, that a lot of these members are coming. Both were coup leaders who are in our country's economy, and both promised a lot of things. I like how you mentioned another thing is that the size of the cabinet. This government, one of the first primary objective was to cut down cost. But the first thing they did, they bloated up their salaries, expanded cabinet to the highest ever in Fiji's history, huge capital expenses for government, and then also the non-delivery of all the promises. How would you compare as an individual who has, as a civic worker who has worked with communities on the ground, how would you compare the two history that was led by the two governments?
So maybe some interesting things about our democracy since independence. I don't think, as far as I remember, there's ever been a term that whenever there's been a change of leadership in government, somebody has finished their full term. I think after Ratu Mara, there was the government that was removed by the current Prime Minister's coup. And then after that, there was a period of interim government, Council of National Unity or something like that, to bring in democracy. There was a new constitution. Then there were two elections that happened. When Mr. Rambuka's term came to an end, 1999, Chaudhry came in, there was a coup. He did not get to finish his term. Then Mr. Garasi came in, and he finished his first term. Within his second term, there was another coup. And then there was a military government. Then there was the same people who did the coup in 2006 came into power. And now we have the coalition government, the People's Alliance, or the People's Coalition government, that is currently possibly being the first that will finish a term after there's a change in leadership. That's one. So might be something historic, I feel, unless my history is wrong. Two, I personally think, and I'm very cautious saying this, that we have a bit of a Stockholm syndrome. We love to elect our oppressors. We did that after the 87 coup. We did that after the 2006 coup. And even the change that we're talking about, the change had to be brought about by somebody who started the coup culture. Now, many people might not like this because of their political ideology and many other factors, but this is our history. And even if you remove something that makes you unhappy in the way it is said, the people who have held power in the country for a very long time are not necessarily people who might have reached those heights through democratic means. They might have had that push that might not be democratic. In terms of what do people feel about our democracy and governance, in 2006 the coup happened. My nephew is in Form 7 now. He's 18 years old. He was born and he's reached his adulthood ready to vote in the next election in an era where both the prime ministers under the interim government, then the 4 years of the Bainimarama government, and now the 3 ongoing years of the Rambuka government, by people who have led coups, who have had military backgrounds, who have entered politics through military coups, who have entered politics by removing democratically elected government, who have given themselves immunity. After 2006, and I was probably in class 3, class 4 at that time, growing up, what I saw as what governance and politics looks like is very different to what my parents saw. My parents were born within the 5 or 10 years before independence. The kind of governance they saw and the kind of governance their children have seen and the kind of governance or politics and governance in Fiji that my nieces and nephews are seeing, 3 different generations and 3 different types of what democracy and governance could look like in Fiji. My nephew, who's possibly going to vote in the next election, has not seen widespread strikes by workers, by people on the street, did not see or did not hear or did not read about people taking to the streets and talking about human rights and talking about values and standing up to power. Why? Because military governments and I can talk about 2006. Of course, there are a lot of things that have happened historically before. I wasn't there. All I know is what I've read and what I've heard. But 2006 and onwards, I was growing up. I was starting to understand what running a country looks like from a citizen's perspective. And with education, you know, you learn more. So my understanding, my perspective, and my experience very different to my parents. My parents, I would say, they are pacifists. You know, they would rather leave and let leave. I, as a personality, I would like to agitate, but I grew up in a time where you could not speak out for the fear of not only what it would mean for you negatively, but also for those around you. So even if you had any thoughts, when I was growing up, you had to think, if I say something, how will it affect my family? Because maybe of my religion, of my race, of my ethnicity, of so many other factors that are nuanced but has a discriminatory approach to it. So I think our history is very colorful, and it teaches us a lot on how maybe the word is evolved, or maybe it's a journey of evolution that has not necessarily reached an endpoint. I don't know what it would look like next, but we really have to think in the upcoming elections, and this is not to say who you should or shouldn't vote for, but I think as people who are going to be casting a vote whenever the next election happens, what do we want for the country that we live in and that our children live in? Because we have seen, not only with this government, and of course I can talk a lot about what hasn't gone right with this government, but successive governments have had lots of failures. And they've also had lots of success. And we don't want to talk about success because, thank you, we are taxpayers. We pay tax for people who stand up and say, vote for me, I'll make life better for you. You did your job. That is literally a job description. I'm not going to clap for you because you did your job.
Yep.
We are talking about things that are not going right, and we are worried because people are working hard and they're paying their taxes and they're expecting services. They're expecting different sectors that is necessary for their livelihood to be better, to get better. But that's not happening. So as we are preparing for elections, campaign periods will start, politicians some of whom have been genuinely coming to people and talking to them and trying to do something, some of whom we will only see when elections draw near. We need to ask ourselves, we have that power to decide who do we choose to lead. And we need to look at how historically we have been divided as a country on so many lines, so many ideologies that for me doesn't do any good for us, because we are talking about things that up till now, I don't understand why people do not understand that this racial divided politics has not given us anything good. And this has been a tried and tried way of elections, which is a huge part of what democracy looks like in the country. I do not know how to answer that question specifically, but as I'm answering, I'm just thinking of all the things that needs to be discussed when it comes to, I'm not a scholar, I'm just a bystander who has an interest in this. I get some of the information, I try to analyze it in my own way. People help me to understand, I help others to understand my perspective. But off the top of my head, I think at some point that onus on who do we choose also comes to us. It's one thing to say, oh, this is what we got. But in the last elections, I saw a lot of young people, a lot of people who were frontline communities to problems that we are facing, who never got the chance, never got the vote, because maybe they didn't have the reach. But as voters, we also didn't try to get to know who are the other people apart from those that we know. And that's not necessarily families and friends. Those are the lardos in the room. Those are the people who have been part of the problem. And we know them because they've been part of the problem. And we're trying to find out who, from among all the problems, is the better of all the evils we know. So I wonder what is going wrong with us as people, as citizens who have the power to vote in or out others to lead us. Why are we not able to have this kind of mindset that we need to analyze what is best for us, not only within the next 4 years of somebody coming into power, but in the long term?
And in Fiji's history, I believe, is it just once we have chose a civilian as a prime minister? Or was it a couple Because it feels like we have a history of just electing just military leaders. And then
Well,
I like the example you gave about the three different generations growing up with three different types of government. But what does that do to the different generation? Because we've seen so one saw on the military. If you look at during the time of Rambuka, most of the Indians who are the minorities of this country were oppressed. They left this land, the only land they knew, from Australia and New Zealand for refuge. Then we went on the Bainimarama government, where we kind of got a taste of freedom and inclusiveness. Then that regime changed, and now we have a coalition government where we have mass migration. Maybe not due to the oppressive government, but due to opportunities that could have happened in our own land, but it's just being offered at foreign land, and they're leaving again. So culturally, religiously, people movement, what's the damage are we looking at?
before I go to answer that question, you said something very interesting. And this is also an interest of mine. You said, under the Bainimarama government, we tasted freedom and inclusiveness. And I would disagree. I would disagree because it's a matter of perspective. There were also people, and not only Bainima, but under different governments, who felt that there was no freedom, who felt that there was no inclusion, or the inclusion was forced because there was no area to disagree or dissent, because there was always this fear hanging over your head. What does it mean if I start towing the line or crossing the line of what is acceptable for people in power? That's one. The second thing is, if there are people who felt, for example, and again, I can only speak in the past 2 or 3 governments because that's when I was present and I was starting to understand things. Yeah. If there were people under the previous government who felt that there was freedom and inclusion, I would say, instead of shooting that idea down, I would like people to understand, why is it that if you, whoever, feels that you did not feel the freedom and inclusion, why is the other person, who's also a Fijian, felt that they had more freedom and inclusion? What was missing in the government before that was present here? And for the other person, what is missing here that was present in the government before? So a lot of this is, of course, political ideology on what you believe. And, there's a lot of the Bainimarama government was marked by the 2013 constitution that has not only gone through their time in government, but has also come into this government's term as something that is of public and national interest, and it impacts us. So I think it is important that we take this. I'm not going to answer, offer responses that will give you a solution. Yeah. I'm hoping that what I'm saying gives people an idea to think like, this is a way that we need to analyze. Somebody said, it was a period of more freedom and inclusion. Okay, I don't agree maybe, or I agree, but somebody said opposite. Why are 2 people in the same country who might be in the same geography, same ethnicity, or same even economic bracket, why are they having these 2 different thoughts of what freedom, inclusion looks like or looked like under this regime? That's one. I think we have had a few civilian governments. We had the Ratuse Mara government, the Bavandra government, the Chaudhry government, and the Garase government. But since independence, maybe if you look at, and it's been what, from 1970 to now, it's been what, 40, 50 years of independence? Sorry, I forgot. How many years of that independence was spent under a democratically elected government, and how many of it was spent under either military regimes, or under the leadership of people who did coups? And that should tell us a lot about.
It shrinks it down to a very small number.
Yeah, it does shrink it maybe to, or maybe there's the number of years difference is a lot less, and that shouldn't be the case. Yeah. The number of years after independence, where we, in more ways than one maybe, got control to sort of define our own political destiny, our own governance, and what democracy could look like, we have spent putting out fires of lack of democracy, rather than trying to build our democracy.
Let's look at now community situations, right? One of the biggest issue Fiji is currently facing is the cost of living crisis. According to data from Reserve Bank and Fiji's economy, inflation is going down. But it feels like everything costs more. As soon as this government came in, the first thing they did was increase VAT. But one of the promise there was that they'll reduce the cost of living. And one of the ways any government can address it is by reducing taxes. We've seen huge budget cuts in massive infrastructure projects because, again, we need to pay off our national debt and stuff. And the policies they have placed in terms of even cutting down on debt. One of the goal was to increase VAT to pay off our debt, but this government kind of and then there's data from Pramila Kumar at Parliamentary. This government has taken up more loans than what the existing debt was on top of it, so to fund those infrastructure projects and whatnot. And I guess it's the general public at the end of the day who pays for it. Everything costs more, from housing to food to fuel to, you can name anything. Cost of doing business, cost of paying salary, in terms of, because minimum wage also hiked up at the same time to $5 an hour, which is it's a debatable question, because it needed to happen, but then again, at what cost? Because it just jacked up the price of everything. I want to understand the real impact on the ground from the people who voted, just like how we said, we had the Stockholm Syndrome, we voted on this promise which wasn't delivered. The previous administration did that, the current administration is doing it. What's the story for the next administration?
Well, if it depend on history, maybe it's not going to be so good, because historically, because of, again, I have to go back to history, because of the history that we come from, and people do desire for a change. I mean, even if I say we should look at what kind of change we are looking for because of the way it's reflected in voting, people do desire for a change. So when somebody is promising that the problem that you are facing now, if you vote for me, I will remove it, naturally I would want to go and vote for that person. Obviously, I don't want to believe it's face value, but if you promise me that I can change it, I want to listen to you. And of course, that's how you get people to listen, because if you said you're going to change it, what is it that you're going to do about it? That's one. I think the thing that interests me in this, and again, I'm going to talk on a little bit of what's happened in Parliament from what I remember, and I used to watch Parliament a lot with my grandfather. When the current government was in opposition and the previous government would come into Parliament and be questioned, like, why is the cost of living increasing? Why are there is a larger people below poverty line? And the previous government would say, oh, it's because of global markets. What's happening globally is affecting.
True.
And that is true, because we are not a petro state. We don't produce oil, but a lot of manufacturing and production that we do here does depend on that. And what we don't produce here, we export, and that also depends on fuel. The same people who are in government now before used to ridicule the fact that government says, oh, the cost of fuel is affecting this, wars are affecting this, etc., etc. But now in government, when they're being asked the same question from those who were in government previously, they're very ready with that answer. And both sides were right when they were in power, saying that it's not only something that that can be controlled nationally. It's international factors have a role, but the political expediency of making excuses and then scoring points by making noise in the Parliament as if some things are not fact just because you don't agree with them, that makes me laugh. I don't know if people remember who said all of these things and who was shouting from the other side, and now who's on the other side and being heckled from those who were in power before. So that's something else we need to think about.
Yep.
I think what's happening and I'm not an economist, so what's happening on the ground is that people are struggling. I think it's happened almost once every year, where certain members of the cabinet or on the government side have put up photos on social media of showing themselves gardening, because when they could not deliver maybe in the first few months, people were impatient because they were expecting things to happen faster, as we always do. I remember the Prime Minister talking about, I think he just talked about it recently.
Prime Minister Rambuka said to address the high cost of living, people should do backyard gardening.
I mean, there's so many problems to talk about here. how many of us have the time to do backyard gardening? We are busy in our 8 to 5 job. If we do backyard gardening, when do we spend time to the family? We have not. So we have not changed the condition of people. We are still overworking them. We are still taxing them, and we are not delivering. And by we, I mean those who are in power.
Yeah.
So we're still caught in that same vicious cycle. So when people feel that when government institutions release or the inflation has gone low, sure, it might have statistically. But is that decrease in inflation showing in the everyday life of people?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem so.
It's a number on a chart.
It's a number on a chart. It's a line on a graph. And then governments should ask themselves, if we are standing in parliament or making speeches to media that, oh, inflation rate has gone down, if we ask a random person on the street, do you feel it? Will they answer yes? So, yes, inflation's gone down maybe, but it doesn't seem to have made a difference in people's life. People are still struggling. People are surviving. And that's the thing, people are surviving. They're not being able to live the full potential of their life because they're too busy thinking, I have to think about the next meal rather than, everything's fine, everything will provide. And when we grow up, when we go into international spaces, and I get to travel a lot for work, when I go into international spaces, I do go there and say, Fiji is the country where it's likely that you may not go hungry because of the abundance of resources. We've got land, we could always farm. But that's sort of a soundbite to describe Fiji. Is that actually happening on the ground? I don't think so. I don't think it's possible. Yes, we can farm. We can possibly not go hungry because we have got the land and resources. But has there been enabling environment that has been built for people to actually utilize and be less dependent on commercial goods for survival? I don't think so. I don't think there has been literacy done, awareness or advocacy on this. So.
And then I think the implication of this on the ground is pretty evidential because, like, we have seen more beggars, we have seen more sex workers on the streets, we have more child beggars, we are seeing more street crimes happening with the fueling of drugs in the mix of it. What kind of social breakdowns is leading to? Because in Fiji it feels like everything is on the rise. So we can talk about inflation on one side, then you look at domestic violence, you look at crimes on the streets and other activities, mass migration, everything is on the rise. So how does economical hardship and social breakdown, what kind of linkage would you let at least the public understand in terms of creating things? Like, for example, right now there's sometimes the debates like minimum wage need to increase in order to counter economic livelihood. But then sometimes people forget businesses has to pay that and they'll just jack up the product. So yes, you want to have higher pay for factory workers, but your flour that you buy with your salary is going to spike up. So what's the fight here? What kind of correlation do you want to actually show in terms of the sex workers, the beggars on the street crimes, and from what you have seen, because you work with these people on the ground too?
The sex trade is the oldest trade in the world. That's one. And I'm saying this because it's a very provocative and controversial topic to talk about. You see social media, the cyberbullying that happens around sex workers asking, to be respected. There are countries which have legalized sex work, but we'll not go there. I don't think Fiji is ready to have that conversation, even to understand. There is a economical relation here, of course. People are resorting to other sources of income, I would say. I cannot give you statistics, but there would be anecdotal evidence of how people have resorted to certain behaviors that might be injurious to themselves or others. And by that, I mean, we're talking about sex work and child begging, but we're also talking about increase in robbery, about how people do not feel safe because some people feel that because of the way our economics is, there is more robberies happening. People are lacking certain things, so they're indulging in this behavior. When it comes to increase in wages and the vicious cycle of you increase wage, price of production increases, somebody has to take that. I think, I don't know if this government or even previous government who have also increased basic minimum wages, have thought of implementing safeguard or safety nets for employers who employ these people, to give them a job to offset the burden on, and I don't want to use the burden because it makes it sound that employees are the problem. I don't think that employers who are saying that we cannot afford an increase are necessarily the problem. I don't think workers wanting to be paid better are the problem. I think the middle ground here, which any governments hold, they're not understanding what they could do economically to ensure that we can have a livable wage, because we call it basic or minimum wage, but actually we want a livable wage. If you have to work 3 hours just to buy a packet of milk and you have an infant at home, that is not a livable wage. That is not a livable wage. And then when we put that burden on people who are employing you, that, oh, you're not even paying me good. But the other side of this is, if I employ 4 people at a higher wage and I cannot run business, I will have to let 2 people go. So then government, who should have the knowledge and the know-how and the expertise and the forum to consult with experts and with people on the ground, are they doing their part in finding solutions to this problem? Then we really need to talk about the fact that Fiji has got lots of resources that we are not utilizing. I don't think that we are looking at the potential of our agriculture sector. And God forbid we talk about the sugar industry, which has been the bane of the racial existence. And I'm going to say it, I felt, as somebody who was born and raised in a sugarcane farming community, on a sugarcane farm, for a large part of my primary and high school life, who as a kid growing up saw the death of the industry in my community. I think my grandfather was the first one in my village in Ba to turn from sugarcane farming to pineapple farming and apiary, honey farm, bee farming. And then now there is more pineapple farms in my community, which was predominantly sugarcane belt area, because people knew that the industry is dying. But successive governments who have got people who have gone to overseas universities, they come with masters and they come with so much degrees, have not seemed to realize that the industry is dying and we cannot waste taxpayers' money into that. That's one. Again, when you come to agriculture, the fact that about 48% of our GDP is because of tourism, and we are a country that is faced with climate change year in, year out.
Yep.
Where climate change and climate-induced disasters, cyclones, is not something that we have control over. And it affects our tourism income. We have not turned to looking at agriculture as alternatives. We have not turned, and with tourism, of course, there's a whole range of issues in commercializing culture and preserving culture, etc. But with agriculture industry itself, we have not explored on diversifying and expanding our economy and the sector itself. We are wanting to send our young kids to university to do a bachelor's of agriculture with the idea that everybody will get an office job. If everybody sits in the office, then what will a agriculture graduate look after if there are no more farms left? So we have built that mentality, and we are not challenging it. We are not looking at different ways we can decrease the unemployment or diversify the employment sector also. So yeah, a whole lot of issues to talk about in this part when it comes to cost of living. And not only this government, not only the previous government, but I think successive governments have failed to grow our economy beyond tourism or diversifying the agricultural sector.
Yeah. With these kind of issues, especially with sex workers, street children, homelessness, you need to create social safety net for these people, either in their homes, with their families, or social welfare is a topic that keeps coming up. What is the current situation of social welfare? Like we already hear the overcapacity with the elderly population. I don't recall we having a public domestic violence home for women who have faced domestic violence on their partners or family members. I don't recall. I mean, Dilkusha homes could be a perfect example, but that's for orphanage. But what about those who are not orphaned? They've gotten abandoned by their family. They're living on the streets. Facilities for them. And with the current drug crisis, with more people, drug addicts being kicked out from their villages and communities, and they're also on the street. Is this a responsibility? Again, I feel like conversation like this can always shift blame to the government, but like I like what you said, like the government can only do what the financial resources they have, but what is the role of community as a whole to do this? And if government has to do this to social welfare, what's the current position of social welfare from your experience? Is it enough to facilitate what's left to come?
Yeah, I mean, something that comes to mind is that on a government level, on national level, we have got, I would say, to a very large extent, some very beautiful policies and laws. What we don't have is a plan to implement it. The Child Protection Policy, the Disabilities Act, we've got a very strong Domestic Violence Act. We have got very strong workplace sexual harassment policies and laws and whatnot. And I think there's a debate going around what the new Employment Relations Act could look like in terms of what the expansion looks like. I won't go there. I haven't had a look at that. The point I'm trying to make here is that, again, successive governments, this government included, previous governments and governments before that, have tried to build on the letter of the law in trying to catch up with social issues. But lack of resources in implementing or strategizing something that makes sense is stopping us from actually implementing what the law says. Some of it has gone through extensive consultations with relevant stakeholders, come up with the best practices that we could have, but we are not having that collaboration between civil society and government. How many, as you asked me this question, I think a lot of viewers from home would be having this same sort of, yeah, this is a valid question, but how many of us actually know about the Child Protection Policy? How many of us actually know what the Domestic Violence DVRO Act or Domestic Violence Act actually has in it? Some of us face different forms of violence that has been codified, that has been written in law, what are the processes and procedures. We don't know because maybe we don't know where to look for it. And government has not done that awareness campaign that there are people who may know about it and would be able to take up the leadership role in communities. So there is a huge gap in the collaboration that government that makes laws and communities that have to abide by it. There's a huge gap in understanding and implementation and awareness and actually trying to take up these best practices. Yes, communities have a responsibility. We're a very sort of communal society, communal country. We live in a communal lifestyle. We do a lot of things collectively. Births, deaths, marriages, religious festivals is all done in a very collective manner. So we have that mentality of taking care of each other, but we don't have enabling environment for those who get left behind. As you said, a lot of people, drugs are causing a lot of problems for us, a lot of kids. I think communities are trying to safeguard everyone by saying we cannot have drugs. We're going to have harsh penalties traditionally, culturally within our social setting if anybody engages in that. Good, because people need to understand that they live in a society which has got rules. But people will continue to make mistakes. What if someone does partake in drugs? Then they get cast out. Does that mean they're no longer part of the community? Who has the responsibility for having safeguards for people who have made mistakes, people who have abused drugs? Do we have the mental health institutional capacity to provide mental health services? Do we have campaigns going around that, okay, some people can change their lives if we have certain support system in place? Do we know what the support system looks like? Are we having that conversation? There's a huge drug problem in the country. And what that has done, it has demonized a lot of people who have resorted to, for example, drug abuse. maybe, I don't know if I can say a lot or some by choice. Some, they had no choice in it.
Yep.
You know, when you're cast out of your house, you try and fit in with a group of people, and fitting in makes you do certain things that
Yep.
you might not necessarily do if there were support systems in place for you to turn away from that habit that you would never have thought of doing. So again, the whole gap between a group of people who make laws and policies that could work well versus the people who tend to have to abide by it, but lack the knowledge on what can be done or what should be done, and what can I tell others in what they should do. So it's a mess.
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because this is one of the questions I had lined up, was that effective policies, right? And then if you look at the drug and the youth crisis we're having, look at one of our first speaker from last season was Dr. Jason Mitchell, who worked for the HIV task force, who said we need to focus on harm reduction policy, especially for around the issues of drugs and HIV, given they work correlated together. And then he's saying focus on harm reduction. Global organizations are funding in donors agencies, funding in millions to come up with treatment plans such as PrEP and other, creating even institutions such as drug rehab. Then it also comes from government side, criminalization. Then the Tambuya literally is suggesting we should hang and punish these criminals. You know, bring back death penalty. You know, the jail system is saying we are overloaded. They're letting go of these people. The court system is flooded with drug cases. Most of the drug leaders in this country are not even prosecuted at times. You know, we just recently prosecuted maybe a couple and dozen, but more popping up. So just like what you just said just earlier, the people who are making this policy and the effectiveness on the ground is so disconnected. What kind of much worse situation will this lead to? Because when these people are the ones who are making these laws and there's no support base.
So an example would be Philippines under the former President Duterte's regime, who he had a hard line against drug. At least we are saying, let's talk about what death penalty would like. I don't support it, and I think I can say I would understand the frustration that might make some people say maybe the death penalty is the way to deter this. Some people have said castration for rape is the way forward. There are certain countries which cut off hands if you steal, for example. But what happened in Philippines is there came across leadership at a national level that completely disregarded human rights. And that's, again, something contentious, which I don't understand, but it's a contentious topic to talk about. And that led to the loss of so many people in the community. Our prison system, you're correct, our prison system is not ready to take in every single person who is part of the drug trade, right? I don't know if we are trying to build infrastructure or systems, put systems in place that will serve the surge that's going to happen. Because I do believe that with this government, there has been a lot more reporting. We are seeing a lot of visibility of the law enforcement being able to do drug busts. That has gone beyond marijuana now to hard drugs. And I believe that the policies that are being made are being strengthened. That's also giving some motivation to law enforcement to be a bit more vigilant and rigorous in the process that they employ in looking at drug cases. But we have effectively criminalized everyone who's part of this, whether you are somebody who sells or whether you are somebody who buys, with no in-between and no attempt to understand. I mean, we have seen videos of kids who are doing what is called Bluetoothing. I think Dr. Jason, in your first season, when we were talking about HIV, people have found new ways of using drugs. Yeah. A lot of this also in my head is because we have used culture as that veil to hide behind talking about things which have become reality in our society. And only when it has come to a tipping point have we started like, okay, we cannot control this, let's criminalize everything and everyone, and this is the safest way out? I feel that. I don't know if that is true, but I feel that that has become the approach because it is out of our hands now. So maybe to show that we are being effective in our fight against drugs, we are taking to the worst or the most furthest possible action that we can take as a society, and we have come to rationalize it as it's okay if we do that to save ourselves. We did not talk about things at the right time. The same thing has happened with violence against children. This is something I hope we get to talk about later when it comes to corporal punishment. You know, criminalizing everything, every mistake. And I'm not saying that we need to pardon people who partake in drug abuse cases, or people who abuse drugs, or people who partake in the drug trade. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we haven't had the chance to explore this sector maybe. The government came, they were very determined. They've tried to put in place certain infrastructure at a national level with the narcotics, I think, committee or something. They've got some policies going on. They've got collaboration between different ministries and government agencies that are important stakeholders in the fight against the drug problem. But a lot of this has been reactive. A lot of this has been we need to bring the case down in any way possible without trying to understand communities who have been involved.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know, you really sparked an interesting word there for me. Criminalize everything when all fails. Because when I'm like looking back at some of the old policies, I'm like, that is a kind of a pattern. So if you think of the environmental damage, right? When the Malolo land incident happened with those Chinese developers, there was no safeguards in place. There's no policies. There was no oversight, overwatch of the whole project till the damage has happened. There was news report, and then when we did take them to court, they only had like $5 in their BSP account. Recently we have a huge spike in car accidents on our highways and streets. So many people are highest death toll that's happening. Instead of looking at what is safe car driving behavior on a street, how to make public transport, even buses are flipping over. To make what public transport as a whole to be safe, we are increasing fines. That will deter from $25 to maybe $100, and that will deter people away from speeding. I doubt that's gonna help. We look at Employment Relationship Act. Instead of creating the capacity to house employees better. Like, for example, I just recently saw Water Authority of Fiji creating breastfeeding centers for female workers to create a more collective workplace. Instead of that, then we have a topic on menstruation leave where we have to give extra 14 days, 20 days of continuous. It's a big debate itself, but then businesses are forced to pay, and then in return, what do we get? Increase in corporate tax. So, and then if we don't abide by, there's more harsher penalties, $100,000 in up to fines by the labor court. What is the goal here when we have this kind of conversation, including topic of drugs? Like, is it to please the rest of the world that come to Fiji, you break a law, this is how the punishment is, or is it we should show that, hey, we have solutions to this kind of problem? For example, and the topic of drugs is something I could not have with my other speakers, and I do want to hear one thing, because we're on the topic of drugs. Other countries have much more drug consumption than us. We're a dot in the ocean. European market has flooded with drugs, but you do not see the mass consumption as we are having here. It's literally, you can find more drugs on the street than saline in hospitals. Like, that's the reality we have come down to. Is it like, so the conversation comes back. Is it just to please our donors and the partners that we are very harsh on criminalization? Because when you have to fix the problem by capacity building, awareness, and building infrastructure to keep it intact, it just costs more money, more time, more effort. Let's just throw everyone to jail, and hopefully that will deter. Is that the goal?
I mean, I can't speak for the government.
Oh, definitely.
I do not know what is the end point or what is the thought process behind this. But look, last year I got the chance to be in Portugal for some time, and I've got some friends there. So I noticed that people were consuming drugs, hard drugs, and I was very surprised. So I talked to them, and they're like, the way the system has been structured is you can have hard drugs on you, but you can't sell it, for example, which has meant that there may be widespread availability of drugs, but people no longer go into harmful practices. Like, I mean, there have been certain. Wait, I need to answer this again. Let me go again with from when you ended your question. I lost my train of thoughts. You had asked me what is the end goal. Yeah. Sorry. So I don't know what the end goal would be. I think that's something they need to ask the government, because they had their consultations. They know that it is a problem. They did their own process in place. There are countries that have got these problems. As you said, there are other countries around the world, but they also have systems in place. They have systems in place that allows them to look at these drugs, in this case, from just beyond the criminal lens. There are support systems in place. There are safeguards. So, as I said, that maybe this was a knee-jerk approach to criminalize everything, but there was a very good initiative that came out of the Ministry of Health with the drug rehab center. When I had that, I was like, I do not know, as it was being announced in Parliament, I do not know if the general public would be very receptive of this. I was surprised that there wasn't a big, debate around this. Maybe, is it because people did not understand what this entailed? It's something that we have seen in movies, or that's happening in other countries around the world. Or is it that people actually understood that it is such a big, bad problem in Fiji that maybe this is the one way we can stop it? And with that realization comes that we were forced to create an environment where people will be able to use drugs, where we're trying, in a very holistic manner, we're trying to say, stop using hard drugs. But at the same time, government is funding, using taxpayers' money and donor funding, a physical place where drug users can go and safely use drugs. Maybe there's a realization in some parts of the national government machinery that this doesn't need to be a criminal offense. It can be managed in other ways. So as much as I say that, yeah, it seems like there has been a giving up attitude and we have just started criminalizing everything, there are some other maybe government ministries or agencies that have thought of innovative ways, because it has been tried and tested in other countries. So we need a little bit more of that thinking, not only at the responsibility shouldn't only have to lie in government. Communities need to come on board, have that dialogue with government, and for that to actually happen, government needs to create the environment. Governments need to create the environment that allows people to want to engage in the discussion. I think there was a poster by one of the cabinet ministers saying, oh, there's a consultation on this bill and there's no one at the civic center in Suva. I'm like, do you ask why? Is it people are not interested in doing submission to this bill, or was your marketing not effective? Because both things are very serious things to talk about.
Yep.
You created a space, but was it an enabling space? Did it enable people to want to engage? Is it because people did not know what to say, because they did not know whatever was being discussed, what was the whole point of it, what was contained, what was the content of what is going to be discussed?
Yep.
So it needs a lot of thinking on how do we ensure communities get on board and try innovative ideas. And maybe you're correct also on that sense that certain things that governments normally do, not this government, not the previous government, governments in whole, people in power in whole, because they also know that my life in politics is controlled by the ballot, that people hold the power. You don't want to open up conversations that might put you on not getting that vote.
Yep.
So it's a lot of factors that are involved in shaping how do governments approach certain situation. For me, the drug problem is a huge problem. It has got lots of different problems that is causing apart from drug abuse itself. I'm not sure if we are equipped to challenge this problem. And even if we are mentally, physically, do we have the resources? Do we have, as a country that is still developing, needs to build its health sector, do we have the time, energy, and the money to now look after a problem that is a little bit out of our hands, I think.
I mean, and the drug situation with the youth, it's a paradox, right? I came to this country in 2006 and started studying from primary school till date. You've been at that time too in finishing primary school maybe.
I'm not that old.
And then we were at a time where there was more education around drugs, HIV, and all the other diseases out there. I think there was a large scale effort. They used to have World HIV Drugs Day every year where we told about practice abstinence from drugs and whatnot, practice abstinence from sex. HIV is bad.
Wait, I don't think that's actually true, because now that we have some level of comprehensive sexual education, we see a lot of, pushback from people and communities. They don't want to talk about sex, but our kids are having sex. The problem, I know what you're going to probably ask, but let me just answer this. The problem is, we know something's a problem, but it makes us uncomfortable as elders, as older people, as guardians of kids. So we don't want to talk about it, but when there are spaces that are created, we want to oppose it, and then we use our culture, tradition, religion as a veil. Just because you don't feel comfortable talking about it doesn't mean young people won't experiment or do it, which means that they might do something right or wrong, and that could lead to a lifelong bad choice that will have a lifelong impact for them. So again, this is also a society problem. We make everything taboo because we don't want to deal with it.
Yep.
And to talk about it is the first step to dealing with it. Because once you talk about it, you acknowledge a problem, and then it becomes a problem that you may have to handle. So what happens is a knee-jerk reaction at the end, which goes straight to harming people or putting people in a position that they might harm others.
Yep, definitely, yeah. And then, that was like the way I was going to that question was that young people are the one who's turning to drugs despite being the education. So I wanted to know, is it that there's something we missed out in the education around drugs, hence we are switching to, or is it the social economic factors that are making people, because now we see kids in primary school who should not face the financial burden, in my opinion, because it's usually parents take care of them, and then we sing, but they're taking marijuana. There was a case where they took crystal meth to school. I do not know why. Maybe they wanted to share with their peers, or is it for their personal consumption? When you see patterns like that, where have we gone wrong? Is it because, again, coming down what you just said, the taboo-ness of it? It's just maybe there was we talked about it in school, but at home this is not practiced, and they're looking at their own family members taking it, so they just think it's normal, and then they bring it back to their school place.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would to a level blame adults, because our knee-jerk reaction, and this is the whole corporal punishment debate in Fiji, is that kids who are supposed to make mistakes, and some mistakes might be really bad, but kids, the moment they make mistakes, they are criminalized in a way like, okay, there has to be punishment for it. There is not positive or negative reinforcement for behavior. We have made violence our answer even with kids, leave alone interactions with adults and disagreements with adults. We have made violence the answer. And then you see that mentality going into national dialogue where let's get the death penalty for drugs.
Yep.
Let's get the worst, harshest, most extreme solution to a problem without even having a dialogue. We're not having that dialogue with kids. We're not having dialogue with each other as a community. Communities are not having dialogues with the government. Government's not having a dialogue with community or its partners. We're not talking to each other and anyone at all on these issues. But the moment it becomes something that we have to confront, we do a knee-jerk reaction and go for the most extreme solution that we could think of, because we have that hope that hopefully this scares people enough that this problem will go away. That's how I feel. It might not be the answer to this question, but that's my perspective on this. And if people think about it, this has been sort of a modus operandi, or the way we approach a lot of problems that we have ignored and only acknowledged until it got out of hand.
And the cycle of violence, either towards kids or towards women, or even men and men in general. Um, why is Fiji so like towards violence in as a whole? I don't know how to even word it properly, because the recent data shows we are the domestic violence capital of the world. There's a woman. There was a data released by UN. Every 3 hours, a woman gets beaten up somewhere, someplace. There's so many flooded cases. FWCC is through the roof in terms of reported cases, and of course, and then the representatives have already showed their frustration with Fiji police on there because they're so slow to act on this. There's recently DVRO cases have been, the restraining orders are violated. What is leading to this violence act? And we're seeing spikes after spike. Yes, there's external factors like social issues and whatnot, but is it again coming back to the taboo and the culture, the file we leave behind of culture and religion and whatnot, where we just feel like it's normal or even okay to beat up women and kids?
I think I will start with the corporal punishment of children as how we have normalized violence in society. And what if people who are loud on social media or in public sphere talked about when it comes to corporal punishment? They have invoked scriptures and God and culture and tradition as if these give them the trump card to just let go of any rational thinking, and that just because I can say my God or my religion or my culture, my tradition allows it, it cannot be questioned. Your perspective? That's one. I mean, I tried very hard when this was coming up in media. I tried very hard not to do commentary. I tried to keep away from it because it's really annoying. It's not even upsetting. It's annoying that adults who were previously in roles where they were responsible for the welfare and well-being of children, and now who are in another responsible role. I'll say the name. It's the teachers' unions that have some of them who have come forward and have been advocating for this. They have started using tropes, making such as religion and culture, making it sound like just because I invoke the name of God, this cannot be questioned. I mean, you're literally trying to tell the general public that I believe in a God that says I can be violent towards children. Somebody just last week was trying to explain to me, what does a smack mean? What does a beating mean? I'm like, you can explain it in all the ways until all the cows and the goats and the chicken come home. It is still violence. What you are saying, whether you are talking about a light beating, whether you're talking about beating until the last breath, it is violence. And you are telling a child that if you don't do something that I agree with, I as the adult who has responsibility over you, if you don't agree with something that I believe you should be doing or shouldn't have done, violence is the way to correct you. So what happens is these kids then grow up thinking that if I have a responsibility in a household, and it tends to be mostly men because of the way society is structured, and a lot of people will be like, oh, look, they're blaming men. But look, the statistics say that men, by far and large, are the perpetrators of violence. And these are not random men, strangers on the street. It is the father, the brother, the husband, the cousin, the male cousin, boyfriends. These are the individuals who perpetrate violence on women, girls, and children, and to other men.
Yep.
So we have normalized this sort of hardened men, or we have allowed violence to be perpetuated on children. Girls see it, that boys sometimes might get beaten more, or girls get beaten more because they go outside of the boundaries of what society expects them to do. So then children either internalize the violence, that okay, if somebody says that I shouldn't have done something, and if they beat me up as I grow up as an adult, that's how I was raised up. Because if somebody who has authority over me beats me up because I did something, it's okay. And then those who become the perpetrators, they feel that because I was treated like that, it's okay to treat. And how many people on social media have made this argument, I was beaten up as a kid, look at me. And I'm like, yeah, look at you. You were beaten up as a kid and you think it's okay to beat another kid now that you are an adult. Because why? You have been made to rationalize and normalize violence as a response.
As an eye for an eye.
Yeah, whether it's for, you said that it's because of external factors, whether it be socioeconomic or economical, whatever, political, mental. We have made it normal that the response to any of these pressures we have, violence is the outlet, violence on others. So, and that's what we continue to do. Every time we say corporal punishment should be allowed, we are teaching kids from a very young age, when they are at an age to learn, that violence is the answer to your frustrations, to people who you disagree with. If you cannot sit down and talk to them, and it's very funny that adults are saying children don't listen. No, you adults don't talk to them. You don't talk to them in a manner that kids would understand. You want to talk to them as if they're adults and expect them to act as an adult while they're children. And then you complain that, oh, they're not listening. They are not supposed to listen to you every time. They're exploring, they're learning, they're making mistakes. Of course, you don't want them to do something that becomes really bad, which means you have a responsibility. You need to fulfill it. And again, the thing that I've said before, our response to something that's out of hand is the most extreme. If I'm unable to employ some sort of response to a child misbehaving, I will not talk because I'll have to talk 5 times. But if I beat them once, they'll go in a corner and cry. So that's our response.
Just like what we have discussed on this, in Fiji, I always feel like we always try to shift the blame to one particular sector. Drug is the problem, jail or hanging them to death is the solution. And then Minister Linda Tambuya, when she was Minister of Women, and one of the things she really advocated heavily on is that pornography leads to violence. What's the correlation? I do not know. Maybe someone from a gender specialist like you who can explain to me. While there's so many other factors I can think of, one of the reason of, I think FWCC always has advocated, one of the reason is always because of financial factors. I don't understand what, when a man gets terminated from their job, comes because of his behavior and whatnot stuff, not because he got laid off because of redundancy, just like maybe poor bad habits at office, comes back and beats up the woman because there's no job, he doesn't have a job anymore. But then the main factor is about not creating facilities for people like him in unemployment sector, but blame pornography as one of the main criminal behind this. And what your comment to that? And I think this is the discussion has been happening over and over, that ban pornography and it might just solve the domestic violence case.
Well, I don't think I'm a gender specialist. I think I would like to say a practitioner, but I think there's 2 things I want to comment on. One, I feel like that it's a trope, what we call a trope, a strawman thing, that pornography is the cause of domestic violence or rape. Actually, that's what the linkage has been made. I think that pornography is a catalyst. I don't think it is the direct cause of, or it might be the only one thing that is causing this. I mean, I don't know, there are certain people who have not, will probably never, 70, 80-year-old men who have not had access to internet or pornography in the sense that we see it, who have raped their granddaughters or their great-granddaughters who are below 8 and 10. So just to say, I mean, and you could say it's an isolated case, but there have been enough studies, and people also quote like, oh, there has been studies that puts that correlation, right? But there's also been enough studies to show that pornography is not the only thing that's causing that. It could be a factor, it could be one of the things, but to create a whole national campaign and put energy and resources into saying that pornography is the one and only thing is a strawman analogy, because we are not then looking at the root cause of the problem, which is we are not making men accountable for the action. And that goes to the second thing you said, that just because someone lost their job, it's like as if we have a responsibility to create environments for them where they don't beat others up. I think it's a personal thing also. I don't have a responsibility not to be beaten up by you just because you had something done to you. I don't have that responsibility. Otherwise, I lose my job and I can beat you up, and I'll just blame, okay, the government did not provide a facility for me to take out my anger. That's not it. And I would come down very hard on this idea that there are excuses or reasonable excuses that would allow, or if not allow, then that would somehow offset the fact that we are giving men the leeway that your actions are not only your actions, but it has got, that there are other factors involved, therefore you're not liable for your actions. I think that is something that society likes to perpetuate a lot. Jaina Sila case, when that rape happened, because he was convicted, a lot of people came online to try and see, or try to make a story like, oh, the girl must have been at problem. Why was she with the drinking with men? What did she expect? I'm sorry, I should not have to live my life expecting you to have moral decency, to have respect for my dignity. I shouldn't have to live my life like that. And I'm very firm in this, because as a man, I understand my privilege, and I could have been one of the bad guys. I could have been a perpetrator of violence myself. Thankfully, I would say, now let me rephrase this. I don't know how to say this. I could have been someone who could have been a bad person and, put my actions as a reason for something or the other. Again, it's a matter of accountability. The idea that we have normalized violence, and that we have told people that violence is necessary. Oh, we're not hitting children, we're just trying to discipline them. So we've given an excuse for some form of violence, and that's what we have done growing up as kids who might have faced violence by their elders, that, okay, violence is okay in certain times. So I lost my job as the man of the household. So if I'm violent towards my family members, I have an excuse. So it's tied. This thing of growing up in a particular environment and society at large being okay with certain behavior that shouldn't be okay, and coming out in public and talking about violence on children as if it doesn't have far-reaching effect. This is what's causing the problem when it comes to domestic violence and rape and normalizing. You talked in the beginning about Fiji being the domestic violence capital in the world. It did not happen in a vacuum. Men did not necessarily wake up and say, I'm going to be violent. We as a society enabled the normalization of violence, and then we enabled certain groups of people, in this case men, that you are allowed to. Why? Because, well, maybe culture, tradition, and we call it patriarchy, but a lot of people don't like that word, because all of a sudden, when their action is labeled to something, oh, this is not a term in my culture, but there is a term in your culture or your language. Or there is a way to describe this behavior. Don't stick to patriarchy, or don't stick to feminism if you don't like it, that's fine. But your actions have a term in your culture, have an adjective or an adverb, and you are that term that you are trying to normalize as a way of life. It might be a bit confusing because there's so much I've got to say on this.
Yeah.
And it does make me a bit angry that every single time we try to find reasons why perpetrators of violence and rape and abuse on children, on women and girls, on other men, on the LGBT community, on the people who are people with disability, we try to find a reason to say, oh, it's because of this. No, it's because of the person who did it. Full stop. Any other thing, a lot of people face a lot of problems. Imagine if we normalized us being violent to each other just because I have a problem. And we don't think like that for some reason. I don't know why. It feels like we have internalized normalizing harmful or actions that are harmful to others. So yeah, it's for some people it would be a small thing in trying to legalize corporal punishment as a policy, but the far-reaching effect is being called the domestic violence or rape capital of the world. And that doesn't sound nice. And that bad feeling you get when someone says that to you is partly because a lot of people, the vocal, I don't know if it's a vocal majority or a vocal minority, but these are the people who allow us to be labeled like that.
Well, you will not like my second question on this topic, though. And the solution, our fellow pastors in church groups, our male parliamentarians have suggested the solution to fixing the violence in men is to create a department of men who will address this issue. Now, FWCC has pushed back on this agenda. Many female feminist groups have also assessed, NGOs have also said this is a bad idea. Help the public understand why can't this happen, why can't it happen, and if it does happen, who needs to make it happen? Is it the government themselves? Is it men holding hands together and making it themselves? Because I think that's how the women did it. They created a space for themselves. So is man willing to walk that same path as they talk? From your experience in this whole situation, how would you break down this? How would you assess this bureaucratic stance they're taking?
I don't know. There's so much to talk about here. First off, let's talk about the fact that every time talk of women's right and equality has come up, I mean, International Women's Day, wait for 8th March. Men will come up with like, where's the day for men? Just because you don't know doesn't mean the day doesn't exist. You need a woman to remind you maybe because you can't do that on your own. But every time something happens that involves the two binary genders mostly and other diverse gender identities and sexualities, this whole debate of, but what about men? What about a men's crisis center? What about Department of Men? And I asked the same people who are saying, what about it? I'm like, what about it? You think we need a men's crisis center? What's stopping you? Do the women have to band together to give you a men's crisis center? And it's mostly men. And that's not to say that there are also women who enable this rhetoric. There are women, some of them in power, who talk about this on social media and enable this mindset that every time women's equality or women's right becomes a issue of public debate or becomes a discussion on a national level, we need to insert men and men's right. That's okay. You can talk about it. But you are only talking about it not as a social issue. You're talking about it because now we are talking about women's issue and you are feeling very scared that by talking about women's issue, you are being put second in the debate. And by you, I don't mean you. I'm just saying in general, of course. So the idea of a Department of Men, to answer that, you need to understand why a lot of countries around the world have got ministries of women, Department of Women, why the UN system has got the UN Women as an agency. There are multiple strategies with donor and partners at a national level, at a CSO level that talk about a gender strategy, because historically women have been disadvantaged, do not have a fair playing field, where men have always dominated and have tried to gatekeep, have tried to stop women from progressing. And in 2026, when we have a woman who takes up a CEO or a manager or a director role, we are celebrating that because it needs to be celebrated. Men have always been in power. So for a woman to break that glass ceiling and all of the barriers and the hardship they face to reach to that level, it needs to be celebrated. But at the same time, I ask myself, we're still in such a bad state that when we should be having 5 women in power, we're still stuck at celebrating only one woman being able to reach that power. So why do we have ministries and agencies and departments of women? Is not to put men down, is to ensure that men as a group and in their diversity even continue to progress, but that women who have been lagging behind because of the way society has seen them catches up the playing field gets equal, that your gendered identities doesn't become a barrier in you achieving or trying to find the same success or trying to have the same opportunity. So ministries of women and all these gendered organizations or gender rights organizations don't exist to pull one group down. It exists to push the one that is already down up and create a level playing field. And I also, for the viewers, I'm very cognizant that this is a women's right issue. Only because I work in that space, but I work in the LGBT space, not necessarily women's space. But this is something that I have colleagues who work on it. So I'm putting it out there for discussion. I might be wrong, so I apologize for that if I say anything wrong around gender equality, but I'm not wrong about this, I feel. Which is, when we say we want a department of men who are already dominating, men who are already having power, who are not letting go of power, we are diverting resources that is needed to make the playing field equal for women. If there was supposed to be X amount of resourcing, and it doesn't always have to be money, it could be capacity building, it could be some kind of support system. If there's X units of resourcing that should have gone to women and making the playing field equal for them, we now have to take away some of that to give to a group of people who already have some form of dominance in particular fields or society as a whole. When the idea is to uplift those who are being left behind by no choice or option of their own, by something they did not choose to. So this, maybe it's above the capacity for others to understand, but this is basically what women's group have said. If you want to have a department of men, if you want to have men's crisis center, there's nothing stopping you. Who are you waiting for the women to form it to? And you said it yourself. Women saw a problem that was affecting them. They banded together, they mobilized, and they continue to mobilize, and they continue to exist. And I think the women's movement have got this very beautiful thing that they say, exist, persist, and resist. They continue to exist. They continue to persist despite all the barriers that is thrown in their way. And they continue to resist the pushback that they have in the work they do to make sure that fellow women are allowed to be successful in their life. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how else anybody could explain. There's been extensive debate on this, and the thing is, despite the extensive debate that happens at least once, twice, or 3 times a year, next year, or rather this year, come 8th of March, mark my words, somebody or many bodies will ask, what about International Men's Day? And I think that's a homework for people to do. Does that day exist? Because it does. You just don't have time to celebrate yourself. Whereas women make it a point to celebrate themselves. But that it's a very sensitive topic also, and we have made it sensitive because we have tried to ensure that people don't go outside the bounds of society, and it's the bounds of society that have normally oppressed marginalized group to remain behind some groups of people. I think the other thing we need to consider is the role that technology plays in violence. And a lot of misconception of violence is that it is confined to, or it is limited to physical violence. There is verbal violence. There are some things that you say to people that hurts them, that affects them, and that becomes mental violence, the spiritual, mental ability of people. There's also financial violence, which is women at some point, very largely before, but also to a very large extent now also, women who did not have financial independence, therefore they could not make decisions. Therefore, if something happened to them in a relationship, be it as a daughter or as a mother or as a wife or as any kind of relationship, the lack of financial stability was also a violence. The new thing we are seeing now with the increase in use of technology, Fiji has got, I think, the 4th cheapest internet in the world. The number of mobile devices, smartphone users in the country is quite high, which means everyone has access to internet. Some of us have multiple accounts with fake profiles, so we feel very brave to say whatever we want. to people. Case in point being Miss Fiji, and who won the Miss Pacific. There was a lot. There was a lot of debate about this poor girl who's 19 years old, who stepped up to represent the country, and who goes on to win Miss Pacific. I expected there to be some sore losers from the region, and in the beginning it was just jokes before I saw things that were being said about her. But our own people, the things that have been said about her when she had no roles in certain things in the entire process on how she came about to be Miss Fiji, and in the judging, for example, criteria in the Miss Pacific Island pageant, to her being crowned, the way we have dragged this 19-year-old, she has just become an adult. She's just stepped out into the world. But we have done our best to pull her down. And that's just the most recent example. There have been so many cases before, and it's a recurring thing. It's a recurring thing. We pull our female politicians down, we pull the LGBT community down, we pull somebody who looks very different to us through racism, through sexism, through all these isms and ists, not realizing that whether you use your fake profile or whether you use your own profile, the words you say have an impact. And then some of these same people have the very bold, they will talk about mental health and stop cyberbullying one day, and the next day they will be the reason somebody's committed suicide. So we need to start thinking, and this affects our kids also. There are kids from a very young age. The age at which kids get access to mobile phones keeps on going down, right down to maybe 3 or 4 years old. I don't know how to use my phone. My 16, 18-year-old nieces and nephews will tell me this is what you do. And I'm not even that old. But children are learning to use technology much faster than us. They're learning a lot of things at that age. And they get access to all of this information of what people are saying, how people are talking, and they're absorbing that. And they're going to become the very people who are bullies online. And the way it affects our society, our community, this hate when people give out your personal information, such as release your nudes and stuff. We have normalized that also, and the number of times this has happened in Fiji, and the commentaries from people blaming the victim because you have some moral high ground is astonishing. And then that links to what we have said earlier. We have a huge gap in having an online safety commission, which is supposed to raise awareness and whatnot. But what are the mechanisms in place in dealing with technology-assisted gender-based violence or cyberbullying in general? To what do people know about this law? How can the people access it? How do people know how to use the critical analysis in what they consume on social media? There's a huge gap between our accessibility to internet and to smartphones and what we are seeing happening online.
The topic of gender violence, I don't think so there's a patch fix to it, because there's too many components to it. What do you reckon from the years for the countries you have traveled to overseas? If there's an analogy you can give me from a country that had high domestic violence and now maybe not to zero, but they have minimized it, and what kind of structural process, even government mindset shift has changed, and you would love to see Fiji, maybe they have tried it or maybe they haven't, or you want to implement it, some evidence-based approach, factors that can address this situation, not completely, but then what is something you would suggest the communities, the government, the social movement bodies can do?
I think the most important things, and I've got nieces, and I've also got nephews who are also impacted by this, is the lack of women in power that we are seeing. Fiji's current parliament, if I'm not wrong, is at an all-time low of women representation in the legislature. How many of our statutory bodies, government agencies are headed by women or have women sitting on boards? we need to find ways to equalize that gender gap in visibility, because we need our kids, and we need society as a large. Not only, it shouldn't only be to kids. We shouldn't have to wait for kids to grow up and be an adult for society to change. People now need to see that there are a diversity of gendered identities and sexualities and whatnot, whether you like it or not, that there are people who are different and they need to be represented. If that requires taking an extra step in how we can equalize the playing field at a government level, even for society to push it, we need to do that. Once we have reached some form of parity in, the representation, we can undo. I think one of the things that possibly maybe there's been a discussion in the women's rights or gender rights movement is temporary special measures. If we are not getting more women in parliament, is it because Fiji doesn't think women should be in parliament, or is it because not many women are standing up for elections because of the barrier it poses? There's more responsibilities on women. It's not easy to say, I'm going to go on a 6 months election campaign, leaving my family and the responsibility that has been put on me. I didn't ask for it. I'm a mother or something, in whatever relationship you have in the family, and I've got a husband, but the responsibility of nurturing, looking after the household is more on me. I'm going to leave all of that and go on a 6 months campaign to convince people that I'll be a good parliamentarian. On top of that, the financial barrier that might exist. When we don't have equal pay between genders, it is more costly to stand in elections. So how can we remove that barrier? So I think there needs to be more representation of women across the board, so that everybody, children, adults, see the representation. Some of them are able to see themselves in that role that a woman is occupying. We also need to strengthen our laws which do not promote gender equality. And this whole concept that's a misinformation on gender equality is that promoting gender equality is only about women. It's not only about women. It's about the most affected party. It just so happens the most affected party in this case happens to be women. And maybe that's how people should see it. Not the moment gender equality is said, it's about women. No, gender equality is about the most affected gender. In this case, it happens to be women in their diversity. So it's not about pulling men down. It's also about unburdening the responsibilities that's been put on men that they didn't ask for. It's about sharing national nation building. So we need more of our laws to recognize and acknowledge who is the affected party, and make sure that laws are aligned to level the playing field for everyone, for the ones who are lagging behind through no choice of their own. And a lot of countries do that. And I know that there's and you might get in trouble for this. There's a debate about the menstruation leave that's happening, right? And I understand what businesses are saying, that this puts undue burden. I also hear, I won't say understand, I hear that there are people saying that by giving the 12 days of menstruation leave, women might become less hireable. Okay, let's agree. It's very much a possibility, not a possibility, it's very much a reality.
Yeah.
Then we need to strengthen laws and come up with solutions to offset what equality in this sense would look like. There are concerns that businesses have. What are those concerns? How can we offset that to ensure that hiring practices don't change? A lot of commentary, and I'll be honest, a lot of commentary from stakeholders across the board have been very, we think, or I think. The we here should not be only that particular group. It should be collectively, this is how we can do. I haven't actually seen opinion pieces that have been written with a very holistic approach to what could be the solution here. A lot of opinion pieces that have been written about this has been, oh no, it won't work. Oh no, it's not possible. maybe if we do this, but let's focus on is 12 days off work. Somebody even made a case, I think, last week, Saturday, talking about how if women are given 12 days of menstruation leave, it will increase the burden on men. And I'm like, that's good that you're acknowledging that if women are not going to be there, it just increases the burden on men. So you do realize that women are important, but you will not have a dialogue on something that is important to them and out of their control. You will not give them that relief. They don't go around asking for menstruation or period pain. A lot of people will not like this being said on TV, but this is a reality. And we shouldn't have to think like, oh, our mother or our sister or our wife or our girlfriend goes through this. You don't have to relate to them in that manner. They are human beings. There are some human beings who go through this, but we refuse to acknowledge that. Why? Because for most of the people who have opined about this, they happen to be men who don't have periods.
Do you think, like, in terms of changing the structure of leadership in parliament, should we have quota system for women to make it mandatory for, given 2026 election year, political parties that are coming in, they should, at least in their manifesto, they should have a quota to have at least 5 or maybe even 10 women representatives who will run in the party come election time, and also allocated seat in parliament regardless of opposition or the main governance, allocated seat for women. So it becomes like a mandatory inclusion to give them the opportunity, because I believe there's external factors that could be playing within parliamentary role to give more power to men.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who's very much, it's called temporary special measures or the quota system. I'm someone who's very much for, there's lots of different identities, persons with disability, young people, people from minority communities that are being marginalized, that need to be represented in the country's highest governance body. It's going to be, I understand also that it's going to be a bit difficult to make sure every single diversity is represented. But it is possible if we start talking and doing something about it, rather than just acknowledging that there is a lack of women, rather than just reading and writing reports about it. There is enough evidence of the problem in the gap that exists, or the disparity that exists in leadership positions between the two binary genders at the very least. I think we should look at temporary special measures. The word temporary tells you it is not something that will exist in perpetuity, right? It is meant to serve a purpose. Once that objective is fulfilled, it can be removed. And that temporary measure is only put in place because it's difficult to offset maybe some of the factors that are affecting women. So you're making it, or any other group for that matter, so you're making it easier for them to be able to come into those roles. They're able to perform. People are able to see that, they are, you're changing minds, hearts and minds around women leadership and women, their ability. At some point, sometimes it's not even the ability of women to lead, it's a problem of visibility. Men still continue to dominate these spaces. In the last elections, how many political parties had women as their party leader? Better yet, how many had a female or a woman deputy party leader? How many had general secretaries that were women or party presidents? How many had boards that had gender equality? What role did women's wing play in the governance and policy making manifesto development of the party? So if you look at all of that, we need some changes and strengthening of law. And you asked me this question, what have other countries done? These are tried and tested things when it comes to gender equality, to make lives better and equal for all, not for women only, for all. Because women contribute to households and communities and societies in the country and can contribute more if they're allowed to lead, just as men are.
And then Man, there's so much to talk about here. But the thing is that let's close the topic with the governance, because at the end of the day, they're the one who matters. Because we can talk to from the ground to the sun, but if the government doesn't step in to address any of the issues, it can't happen. But let's look at the current government's performance and accountability. When policies does come into effect, such as, yes, the address of women playing a role in workplace has been a debate for years, and hence the topic of Employment Relationship Act bill came, but it got shoved down our throat with no proper consultancy. Yes, you did say like women plays a critical role for businesses, and businesses do address that they play a critical role, but when we do want to create some kind of capacity to house them, government goes and increase all taxes and food products and VAT and everything to make the businesses' life more miserable. So, and we have seen this. One of the things with this government is that whenever critical bills came, sometimes there was public consultation, sometimes the process just happened behind the scene. Different ministers which we supported goes under investigation. In fact, under this government, we've seen the highest number of public investigations from FICA against various bodies towards so many ministers, and we have so many new cabinet members that we don't know what's happening.
Everybody is a minister or something.
Yeah, everyone is a minister of something or assistant minister of something. And where does performance and accountability stand at the end of the day when we want to fact check these people in power in terms of policies they promised us but they have failed to deliver?
Let me start by acknowledging that it's difficult to have a coalition government with three political parties with three different sets of ideologies who all have to cater to their voter base. So yes, when you come into a group like that, you compromise. However, that compromise should not include certain values and principles that actually all political parties should have across the board. I understand, I think the current government has talked about introducing a code of conduct bill maybe for members of parliament. That would actually be nice. I think when this government started in the first year, I think they spent more time consulting on things which I was very surprised by, because we do know the state of affairs of the country from a very long time. We know the areas that needed work, and I think the consultation was welcomed. I'm very pessimist. I'm very cynical on certain actions. I've scrutinized it a lot. I did question, like, was this an attempt to do things differently in terms of visibility, but not in terms of action, to show the public that we are asking you. But then because my question then becomes that I think there was a fiscal review committee that made a report. I understand that they made about 60 or something recommendations, and of course the government has a discretion to choose which or how many recommendations they'll implement. But for me, it was interesting in what did they choose to implement as fiscal policies following a round of consultations. Because, and I hope people don't think that I'm trying to compare apples and oranges, because as I don't support the way the 2013 constitution was done. I don't care if it was for my benefit because of my particular identity. There has to be a democratic process in doing that. There has to be a democratic way. So it comes to again what I said, that people who are sitting in government now were in opposition, and they were voicing dissent or disagreement over certain processes. So there was there were 18,000 submissions made to the Yashghai Constitution Committee, but then they burnt it and they only used 1,800 submissions to make the current constitution. I don't know if that is a fact, but that was sort of a discussion point in a lot of spaces, that this is how the 2013 constitution came to be. So when I first saw the fiscal review committee's members saying, we gave 60 recommendations through nationwide consultation, but we feel that only 6 to 12, I think, if I'm not wrong, 15 were included. I'm like, what's the use of having an independent committee or consultation that have asked people who bother and who care, and that the committee or the commission or the body has gone and asked people, made an effort to engage people, and people have said, this is what we want. And then the government saying that it is at our discretion on what we choose. So why have consultations? You have consultations because you want to listen to what the public says. And then the public who put you there have told you what they want. But then you feel you can go above this consultation where we have put thousands and thousands of dollars to say, we hear you, but we know better. And some of these decisions where not everything was implemented is because resource constraint. Problem then becomes is how is the government of the day? And again, it doesn't have to be necessarily this government. It is governance in general in Fiji or anywhere in the world at some point maybe. How are we communicating to the public that, okay, at this point in time, we are only able to implement 5 out of 10, and then in the next 2 years, we'll implement the next 2 and the next 2. So we're having consultations, which is good, but how much of it are we implementing? Because the consultation is the voice of the people telling the government, this is what we need you or want you to do, this is what we think needs to happen. It is the responsibility of the government to find the pathways to implement the will of the people. It is also sometimes, it is a matter of, like the corporal punishment thing. There is a lot of discussion around that. But how extensive has been the consultation? So this is the other thing when it comes to consultation, right? We are talking about corporal punishment that is going to affect children, primary, secondary school children. We have asked every Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary.
Beside the children.
Beside the children. Obviously they're going to say no, but that doesn't mean you don't ask them. The very people it will affect, because we have centered, as adults, we have centered ourselves that we are the disciplinarians, we are the guardians, we are the ones who are responsible. We get to decide, because you've made this, whatever is the problem that is making you think about corporal punishment, about yourself. You are looking at it as it's causing me, it's making me uncomfortable, it's causing me problem. I don't care what the kids say. Likewise, who are we asking? Who are we consulting? And if we are able to, if we can say that we have consulted every single either person or representative of groups of people, then why not implementing?
It's quite interesting because we want to beat up kids without asking the kid, do we have a permission to beat you up legally? And we're beating up women, then we want to consult with men that we should consult with you before we beat up the woman. And why is it that in the government structure is that the consultancy is, I feel like the decision has already been made behind the scene. They just come out in public to validate it. And one of the reasons one would be, what I have noticed is that the EFL tariff, which just recently happened, it happened in the middle of Christmas. No one was consulted. The tariff bill was passed and everything was decided behind the scene. And then come January, they wanted to enforce it till private sector intervened and stopped it. So what's the goal here by doing such acts?
I think, so this is something that I've only partially followed, but from what I understand is, so they are an independent body, right?
Yeah.
Government cannot interfere, but Parliament has oversight over statutory bodies and agencies. They do need to respond to Parliament as the House of the People. And I think I listened to the CEO, it was very interesting, where she's like, oh, the government cannot interfere. True, the government cannot interfere, but you have laws which govern your processes. The responsibility as the head of that organization, and not only her, people who have leadership position, I think they have a board maybe, yeah. They are answerable to the public. When the public says, who did you consult? You must ask, you must inform the public who you consult. Saying a blanket statement, oh, we consulted stakeholders. One party is a stakeholder, 2 parties are stakeholders, 20 parties are stakeholders. You need to make sure the public trusts the processes that you're following to actually, make sure the consultation process is meaningful. But again, the way we are communicating to the public as government entities, government bodies, governments, as governance institutions that make decisions and policies, I don't think we have quite got the handle on how we should communicate and market the way the decisions are made. And that was the main problem here, that it was so many blanket statements that, oh, we know, we have done this, we know what we should be doing, we're not answerable to that, they're not allowed to interfere. Yes, true. But you're very vocal on things which doesn't make you uncomfortable, but you quickly put on a defense on things that is about accountability and transparency. So the whole idea being that consultations are good. We should invest in consultation. We should engage with the public. We should ask the public what they want. Just because 3 or 4 years ago, the entire country went and voted you in shouldn't give you the carte blanche. Shouldn't give you the authority, a full authority to say, I no longer have to talk to you. You gave me that power. See you after 4 years. Democracy doesn't start and end at the ballots. People must always be involved. That's a healthy democracy. People must be able to say no. People must be able to strike. People must be able to hold rallies without having to ask permission from you, can I disagree with you, by applying for a permit to march.
Yeah.
So when we talk about democracy, because the Prime Minister said this when there were some inquiries and committees that sat and talked about, certain things that people are aware of, and I think it's in court. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about this, so I'll just speak generally. I remember the government social media said that the Prime Minister made a statement that, oh, democracy is well and alive. I'm like, how? With all the shitstorm that has happened, just because it's public and you are unable to control the narrative doesn't make democracy alive. You're still not listening to people. You're still acting like, oh, I'm in this particular position, therefore I can do as and what I like. There are certain standards that are required of you, of anyone, in a public office role. And this, I would say, arrogance that, oh, I was voted in, therefore I have a leeway to do as wanted because people voted for me. So yeah, consultations are necessary, consultations are important, but just as important, consultations are a listening government, a government that tries to ensure that what people want, because we pay tax, we entrust ministers and governments with money to make our lives better. Of course, we haven't talked about the whole salary increase saga, but that has a role also to, that is also a discussion. As you said, there's so many things to discuss. But yeah, so, consultations are good. Even better is to actually listen to what people said.
Now, lastly, elections, we do not know again when it's going to be. Maybe before Feb 27. But given people will go again on the ballots to decide their next leader, I believe at the time of this conversation, we have close to 8 political parties who may be running at the next election. There could be more because maybe
I think there's about 6 who are waiting to fulfill the requirements.
Department of Election Office, Electoral Office said they're expecting close to 17 to be running.
Wait, okay, I was wrong.
Yeah, it's close to 17 at the final number, but then currently the legal number fully registered or has made proposals are around 8, and it might just even increase because more applications are yet to come. But regardless of that, because it looks like there's a lot of choices, but again, I don't know if you're the expert to talk about that part. No. Is more choices better? But I don't want people to worry about the choices yet. When it's time for election, we'll come to that. What I want to know, as a voter, with the Stockholm syndrome we have of choosing coup leaders as our country's leader, choosing ministers who are filled with controversy and scandals and so much under the current coalition government, seeing leaders who are currently under investigation from FICAC, who many has idolized as some of those ideal ministers. Going to that ballot at the end of this year, as a general public, both for me and you, of course, from the position we stand at, what should be in our back of our head when we are choosing our next leader? Is it safe bet to, like a toxic relationship, we go back, have the Stockholm syndrome of choosing our leaders? We're not, and then, or is it good to explore something new? But is that the risk you're willing to take? Or what is that could be like a third option? And I'm not telling you to decide for the general public. I just want to have an open discussion on, if I am going as a 26-year-old to vote, what am I voting for? Am I voting for a transparent government? Am I voting for a future for the youth of myself and many others in Fiji, so we don't have to migrate to Australia, New Zealand, which our government is very happy to export us like China exports BYD cars? Is it our economy where we are stable and we're self-resourced, that we are not dependent and we're not damaged by the external shocks of US and China trade wars? How does a person makes that decision going to a poll, and it might be one of the most controversial election we'll ever have, given the coalition is cracked, public is opinionated, fragmented, and
the former party in government, the former government is no longer.
Yeah, then they're in their own disruptive mood of I don't know, a high school breakup. But let's go. Like, what do we do in this kind of situation? I am lost for words as a host too myself. When people ask me, Rakeen, what should we do in the coming election? I have no words, because I'm like, I am as lost as you are. But is there something from your years of analyzing history? Is there some kind of guidance you can give us before we come back to this conversation again?
I don't know about guidance, but so in the last election, after the results were announced and we knew where things were, well, actually we didn't know where things were standing. Yeah. We only knew where the seats were. We didn't know who we would get into parliament. That took some time. I'm sorry, we would get in government, because that took some time. So I was having a discussion with a few young people, and so there was this same, the Stockholm syndrome phrase came from that discussion, that we seem to have Stockholm syndrome because whichever way this goes, we will for sure get a prime minister that may have been part of coups in the past. And then somebody asked, like, but why do we do this to ourselves? And somebody else answered in the discussion, which struck me as very interesting, which was, sometimes it's better the devil you know. We talk about, we want change, and that change is not only about what we are doing or how we are doing it. It's also about changing the people who are in that position. For some people, you would choose the better of, and I'm saying this in a general sense, you choose the better of two or many evils over somebody you do not know. But then I voiced something there, which was, if you look at where we are at as a country, can we sink any lower in some of the sectors and parts? So, if we have tried to flog the dead horse by putting the same old people who promise us something but do not deliver, what would loss look like if you put some new blood in parliament? I mean, could we get screwed more? Is there any other level to sink in some aspects? I don't know. I, as a voter myself, I don't know what will be my deciding, the thing that will decide for me who I vote for. I obviously want a lot of things. And as you said, is it better that we have lots of choices? On one point, the fact that more people are participating in the electoral processes as candidates through political parties, taking part in campaigns, is a good thing. But just because there's lots of people who are contesting doesn't mean there's lots of good choices. What is a good choice for me could be very different as a good choice for the viewers, for you, for people. I don't know how people decide that. But I think what I could say is what I said in the very beginning, which was we may really want to think of our history as a country, pre-independence and post-independence. What have been the mistakes we have made? What are the personalities we have put in power? It doesn't only have to be the Prime Minister, it is multiple roles within statutory bodies and whatnot. And what have our choices given us? That's an exercise that we must, not only in the next election, in every future election, we must put ourselves into. Sometimes you'll want to choose the same people you don't agree with because they seem a safer bet. Sometimes you might choose people who are not the right people, but at least there was some sense of security, as you said in the beginning. So I don't have any, I'm just thinking out loud here, I don't have any pearls of wisdom on this. I'm as lost as a lot of people are, I think. We have time till the next elections. Maybe it's time we started getting some interest in our country's politics, because our very being is political. Everything's political. If you say, oh, I'm politically neutral, yeah, but the ability for you to be neutral is political also, because you were given the choice to be neutral, because you could have been forced to not be neutral also. That was a political decision made at a political level, that you will have the freedom to choose to either take a political stance or to be neutral. So everything's political. The clothes you wear, if you choose a particular brand of shoes, you could have the choice not to. You could not have the right to. Everything's political. So we need to think carefully about our country, not people, not personalities, not parties, about the country as a whole.
Abdul, I think this is a very insightful conversation. Thank you so much for your time, for coming on the DWIF show for a season opener. And on behalf of the public, I hope you enjoyed this interesting conversation. On behalf of the DWIF show team, that's a wrap.